Alright, this is lesson 10 and it's on trademarks. If you ever notice in your rings, a lot of times it'll say 10K FZ or 10K and got numbers by it, or 10K has got letters up by it. Well, those letters are called trademarks, and Jeff's going to show you what some of them mean and all right here.
Alright, this is Jeff the Jeweler. This is lesson 10. Up to now you've learned how to buy gold, hopefully, competently, using math and science to arrive at a buy price that's below the melt price. And the future lessons will show you how to turn your money into gold and turn your gold back into money. But right now this is lesson 10, and this is the last lesson having to do with buying gold. We may add stuff on in the future, but for the most part, if you've watched the first 10 lessons, you should be able to competently buy gold at any pawn shop, open a pawn shop, out in the field, wherever you find gold, you should be able to buy it. Alright, so this is kind of a trick for jewelers. This has to do with trademarks. This kind of reassures you, maybe before you've made the purchase or even after you've made the purchase. Trademarks are copyright symbols. These are marks that you find on manufactured jewelry that you don't readily understand or are able to identify. You'll see 14 karat, and then you'll see a stamp symbol under it. The stamp symbol has to do with tracing that item back to the original manufacturer, What happens when you make jewelry? Like for 20 years I've made jewelry. The Federal Trade Commission insisted that I get a stamp, a JM stamp. So when I make something, I stamp it on the inside of the shank or the outside of the pendant or chain. It not only identifies me, Jeff the Jeweler, as the maker of the item. If something's wrong with the item years from now and they don't know what that stamp means and they test it, they can trace that stamp all the way back through the Federal Trade Commission to my registered trademark, and that comes back to me. If it's under-carated, that's when that's most important. Chesapeake's bought a bunch of chains from China and tested a few of them and then sold hundreds of them. Well, the ones they didn't test turned out to be 13 karat. Way down the line, they get tested, they don't pass the 14 karat test, they trace them all the way back to where they were sold and then all the way back to the manufacturer. Outside the country, there's no litigation, so they blamed it on Chesapeake's and prosecuted them $250,000 per violation. So the trade stamp becomes very important to the person buying it out in the field. It's reassurance that this is a real item. When it's not reassuring is when it says Tiffany's or Cartier or some stamp that it's worth faking. It's only when the stamp isn't identifiable readily to anybody that it's probably real and can reassure you that the item you're buying is also real. Alright, let me show you what I mean. Alright, these are trade stamps. Up here it says it's a chain, it's the top of a chain tag. It says 14 karat up here. Under that it's got a prominent stamp, just as prominent as the 14 karat stamp. It says RCI. This is a maker in Italy that's registered their trademark with the United States so it can be sold in this country, and then it's stamped accordingly. Here's some symbols that are found here in, inside a ring shank, and I think these people also make silver items. So you would see this stamp on the inside. It's meaningless to you, but what this means to the Federal Trade Commission or to a jeweler, that it's probably real. You can trace it back to who actually made it. If you collected Black Hills gold, this is the symbol. It might be familiar with you. You might have found this in something. This is the antique symbol. It looks like two mountains with another mountain in between it. This is the Black Hills symbol. Over here it's a little lion above the 14 karat. This is how it actually works. This is an enlargement of a rose gold bangle, or shank I think in actual this case. It's got a B facing in one direction and then a B facing in the other direction, kind of like Bill Blass. They also use a similar symbol, but in this case it means Baskin Brothers, 185th 6th Avenue, New York. This is so you can trace this item back to the actual maker. In this case, they're hoping that they'll become a prominent maker and that people will collect their pieces and be able to identify their stamps. But as their stamp becomes more prominent, then it's worth faking. A CC stamp, a Chanel stamp, or a Gucci stamp, or Cartier, or even Tiffany's inside a ring or on a piece of jewelry shouldn't reassure you at all that the item is real. You could test these items and it turned out to be a real material. And the problem is the name is worth money. So you're unable to buy the piece without paying for melt plus the rarity factor of it being Cartier, Tiffany, Chanel, or Gucci, or any other prominent maker that you recognize that you would put your money in. It's only when the trade stamp is not recognizable that it should be reassuring. The RCI, you don't know what that means. I don't know what that company is either, but I know what that stamp is. So to me, it's very reassuring. Long before I test it or even run it across a magnet, I'd bet this is real because of that stamp and these stamps that show up in every piece of manufactured jewelry. And if you make things prominently, you'll have to have one. So if you see a piece of jewelry without a trade stamp, that also tells you buyer beware. There's no trade stamp on this. It's a chain. It looks like it's made by a machine. It's sold here, and I'm finding it in the United States. It should have a trade stamp somewhere on it, some kind of symbol you can identify. If it doesn't, that's the first clue that it's a fake. Made in Italy is not a trade stamp. That doesn't reassure anybody. A matter of fact, if it says made in Italy, 9 times out of 10 it's probably fake. So these are tough little lessons that cost you money that hopefully you learn up front in some kind of silly little game plan here that keeps you from losing money. All right, 100, 200, even 400 years ago, trade symbols used to look like this, and they were registered, I believe, first in England. And if you manufactured silver items or gold in England, going back 300, 400, maybe 500 years, you had to register a trade symbol, and it was actually drawn in a book and recorded, and then these symbols denoted this piece of jewelry is made by this maker. Okay, modern day, modern day we're on the internet, but it's all recorded at the Library of Congress in a symbols book each year, the symbols that each manufacturer uses, and he has to register them every year that he changes. This way, when you see this symbol, it can easily be traced back to the manufacturer. In this case, it's Pony. All these symbols are registered trademarks of Pony. They'd be found in the trademark symbol book. You don't need the book. If you see symbols you don't understand, you can pretty much rest assured this item's probably real. Alright, so that's been lesson 10, and it has to do with trademarks, and it has to do with reassuring you after you bought something, or even before you've bought something, that it's probably real. As long as it doesn't say Tiffany, Cartier, Gucci, or something like that prominently displayed, you've probably got nothing to worry about when you see a trade symbol. It should reassure you that this is a real item. Alright, the next lessons we're going to show you how to turn your money that you turned into gold back into money. And of course, the difference being the profit. That's why you're doing this. Alright, thanks again. It's Jeff the Jeweler. This has been lesson 10. Please check out lesson 11. Thanks again.
Alright, I know all y'all are running back to your jewelry and looking at the numbers, see what they mean, and checking off Jeff's list and see if they match up, aren't you? I know you are. Anyway, that's a pretty good video right there to kind of explain to you what they mean and how they go to recognize certain trademarks. Alright, that's the end of lesson 10, and we'll have to talk to Jeff about making a lesson 11 coming up.